Welcome back to another episode of R4E, the Reason for Everything podcast. Excited for today's guest, Anthony Carlton. Is that right? Carlton, is that how
Yeah.
it's pronounced? Perfect. All right. Excited for today's guest, Anthony Carlton. We got connected on LinkedIn a couple of months ago and excited to share his story with you all. You're currently creating FinGhost. I'll let you explain a little bit more about that as we dive into the episode here, but would love to give you a chance to introduce yourself and give the audience some context as to who you are and where you're calling in from.
Yeah. And first, thanks for having me on. I mentioned before that, I was checking out your podcast and you had one of my favorite creators on the podcast, Anthony Pompliano. So yeah, happy to be here. And my story in the real quick background is I was going the traditional finance route and was kind of chugging along and had a successful career as an analyst and wealth advisor, and then made a pivot that was very lifestyle design oriented. And, I saw the creator economy and what some other entrepreneurs were doing in the creator economy. So, transitioned full time to being a creator and building a business around finance and real estate, my niche that I'm from, and helping entrepreneurs build their brands on LinkedIn and really attract leads and investors. So it's been a very interesting 12 months since I've quit my last finance job.
Well, maybe let me start off with the probably most pressing question to start, especially being a finance guy as well. The biggest, hurdle that I hear from a lot of people in your seat is the golden handcuffs and keeping them, they have their paycheck coming in, they like their lifestyle, they don't want to necessarily, even if they, make a couple of cuts and try to be a little bit more conservative in their spending, a lot of people just aren't willing to give up the paychecks, So how did you get comfortable, again, being a finance minded individual, get comfortable with the breaking free of golden handcuffs and knowing that there's not going to necessarily be a sustainable and I guess stable, a better way to put it, stable income coming in month over month?
Yeah, as a financial advisor and working with a lot of millennials, in 6 years as a financial advisor, you really get to see these different types of money mindsets. And so it's interesting because there are a lot of people who reach out to me and it feels like the biggest risk for them is leaving that safe salary behind. And if they haven't made any money on the internet yet, that can feel like an impossible task. So going all the way back to the start of my career, I got really interested in personal finance, just, on my own. Like I didn't come from money and kind of grew up watching other people who they were going on vacations and, their families were traveling and things like that. And so I always aspired to make money and, be wealthy at some point. And I could kind of see that entrepreneurship and investing and this finance path was definitely a route towards financial freedom. And so I was on this traditional finance path and was going along and was having some success, and my income was going up each year. And then in 2019, I was burning out because I was at a really great firm in Chicago, but I was in that position. Um, if you're young and you're a junior person at the firm, you have to be the first one in and the last one out, and you're the one working the most hours. So I had a couple of experiences with burnout that really pushed me to look at some other options. And so the creator economy and writing content online and building a business, whether it's coaching or we're doing ghostwriting, or some other simple service business. I've always been trying to figure that out. So it was really a couple of years in the making where I was actually building on the side and making sure that I had the income and the clients and the stability before making that jump. Um, but I definitely got burned along the way. I actually tried to quit my job in 2019 and become a solopreneur and had no idea what I was doing. I had no audience on social media like I do this time around. And I had no trust, basically. So I had no customers. And so I learned pretty quickly, um, if you don't know how to sell and if you don't have trust from an audience and you don't have an offer, you're a fancy website and logo isn't going to attract people. And so I quickly pivoted and kind of ran back to a W-2. And that financially hurt because I had to spend a lot of my savings that I had been building up to that point on living expenses because I wasn't making any money from this business. So I actually failed at this once before, which taught me a lot of
Mm.
lessons of what not to do for this time around.
Very interesting. Now, mechanically speaking, because I get this question from a lot of peers in my network, and I'd be really interested to hear your perspective again at a very interesting intersection of finance, personal finance, investing, and the creator economy. The question that always comes up is, and what I talk about on this show a bunch, is that leap of faith and making that jump into taking on that side hustle to become your full time hustler or main hustle. The question I always get from my peers is, at what point do you know? And now you mentioned you failed once, and appreciate your candor there. When you went at it a second time, did you have a spreadsheet built out saying, all right, when I'm pulling in X amount of revenue each month, at that point I can replace my W-2? Or was it more of a feel, an instinct thing for you? What was that experience like? Because again, that the actual mechanics of getting comfortable with, putting aside your W-2 is the thing that keeps popping up in my universe. So I'd love to hear your perspectives there.
Yeah, I get those questions a lot too. It is tough where they look at somebody like me and it looks as if I just successfully hopped from finance over to the creator economy, which now realistically, I made back my finance salary in like the first 4 or 5 months of becoming a full-time creator. But a lot of people don't see the 2 years leading up to that, where when I ran back to a W-2 the first time, I realized, okay, you need to build a skill stack that's actually going to get you from being a W-2 employee to being a solopreneur. And so that's just a different type of skill stack. Learning social media and LinkedIn, I had already been writing there and I got serious about, I'm going to show up here and post every single day, and I'm going to engage with other people in the finance and real estate niche. And I'm going to try to win financial advising clients organically by building my brand on LinkedIn. So I was really the only person at the firm that was doing that. The last place I was at, Farther, which now they've kind of exploded. They're a wealth management tech company, and I think they just crossed 1.6 billion in AUM, and they were very small when I was there. So I got to experiment and I got to be an entrepreneur. And so I'm writing on LinkedIn and building trust with an audience as a financial advisor over there. And if I hadn't done that for 12 months on the side and treated it like it was part of my job, I would not have successfully made the transition to solopreneur, because showing up every single day and becoming known for something, hopefully for writing and publishing valuable content that resonates and that educates people. Sometimes it was on finance, sometimes it was on personal development, entrepreneurship, but I just showed up enough daily where other financial advisors started asking me, how do you do that? How do you get clients from LinkedIn? Advisors on my team, as well as just ones that were on LinkedIn, seeing my content and aspired to build their brand and have this kind of leverage. So that's where it kind of clicked for me, where I could either go this path where I'm building a wealth management client business under the umbrella of this tech company, which was very appealing. And, I had put in a lot of work doing that. And then there was this alternative path of the creator economy. And I could just feel from 12 months of writing and showing up every day online that I could feel that there was trust built into my audience. And when I did eventually announce on LinkedIn, just in a LinkedIn post, hey, I'm leaving finance to go do this thing to help other financial advisors and people in this niche build their brand and kind of figure out what I figured out over the last 12 months. And I got a flood of inbound DMs. Like, I got my first ghostwriting client from that post. I got probably 10 to 15 leads from people who had been showing up on my content that was free for 12 months. And so as soon as I have an offer, then I had immediate customers and clients. So I think that part, if you don't do that and you just try to make a transition without audience that has trust built in, it is extremely hard. You'll have to do a lot of cold outreach and get rejected, and probably won't be able to charge, very high prices to
Right.
start out. So that was a huge piece of leverage.
It's interesting. It's almost like you already had a full product market fit. As you're almost launching in stealth, as the tech community calls it these days. You were pretty much launching in stealth, whether it was conscious or subconsciously, over that 12-month period as you were going back for your second stint at W2 before jumping back out. Now having that product market fit was so key, but again, you have to continue to build and validate, and you're still a pretty young guy. I'm sure there's a huge hurdle in terms of gaining trust, especially in a community that's so used to you need a little bit of gray sometimes to really kind of move the needle. I want to dive into that, but before we do, you talked about your time as an entrepreneur, and I feel like that's overlooked so often in people in our generation. And that you're really, the way I think about it, and why I love my day job, is I'm learning so much about client management, about building books of business, and really honing in on my skills, and essentially using that as a springboard to then jump on calls like this and learn from other smart people, and really kind of be building two different groups of networks at the same time as they slowly start to come together. And so, any more thoughts on entrepreneurship? Because I feel like it's so easy to be scrolling on social media and think, hey, I could be doing this myself. I'm going to go and do this, versus actually taking the time to learn and get dedicated and have a stable income going on at the same time.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because I didn't appreciate entrepreneurship the first time around. And I didn't appreciate, as a financial advisor, I was an entrepreneur already and didn't even know it. Because when you come into a firm, you're expected to be a producer, you're expected to have business development skills and develop a book of business, as well as the analytical and the client facing skills, and putting together a financial plan, and all of those things. And then I left, and this whole failure period of figuring out, what am I doing? As soon as I wasn't making money and my bank account started straining, and I started to get a little bit worried, I went into full scrappy entrepreneur mode. Like, I remembered that I had a personal training certification that I randomly gotten, and I was like, oh, okay, I can go get a couple personal training clients in Chicago. I was walking dogs, like, all while trying to build this thing on the side. And then I was like, you know what? LinkedIn is this weird place where I can probably just reach out to CEOs of companies. And that's always kind of been my mindset of, I want to work at the best companies. I don't want to go through the front door with a resume. I want to go figure out how to reach, these places that usually only hire Harvard grads, where I'm not coming from that. I don't have a great GPA, but I think that I can hang here. So I started using LinkedIn and reaching out to some of these companies in the fintech space who were doing really interesting financial wellness tech. One of them was LearnLux, which was backed by, I think, Salesforce, Mark Benioff, and they were doing some interesting things. And I said, hey, I'm a financial advisor. I see what you guys are doing. I reached out to the COO, he's younger than I am. He goes, oh yeah, let's connect. Let's get on a call. And so long story short, I end up writing content and learning how to run a content team at this company. And then, fast forward a couple of months, I'm like, I'm going to go back and try this financial advisor thing full time and build my business. And so that's the entrepreneur. I saw this. I basically thought of, who is building the future of wealth management, and how can I find them on LinkedIn? And I even have in my DMs the CEO of Farther. I pinged him probably 4 times with an outreach message before he was like, hey, let's hop on the phone. And it was at this perfect trajectory period of, they were growing and hiring advisors. So I was advisor number like maybe 3 there. I think now they have like a team of 150, which is only a year or 2 later. And so I really got to learn how to build a business inside of that company because of how early it was. And it's this intersection between tech, where I'm working with product designers and engineers, while also doing the client-facing side and learning sales. So I really did learn the skills of how to be an entrepreneur I also invested a ton of money during that 12-month period before I left the last time, in a coach who could help me close more high net worth clients, which what he taught me, I basically said, well, I can just pick these skills up and put them on top of any offer or any business. And so that's really where I started thinking maybe I should do, this solopreneur creator economy thing. And just had been lucky that I built the skill stack and kind of had that trust with my audience before launching. Because, yeah, like I said, people reach out all the time too. And if they don't have that, I think it's really tough to make it work.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the point about the entrepreneurial fight or flight kicking in at a certain point. It's fascinating though, when the candle's burning at both ends like that, where it's like, hey, my savings are depleting, but I also know I'm building some momentum with this business, and you obviously want to avoid that inflection point. And so at that point, you're walking dogs and you're doing your personal training and everything else there. I always think about in situations like that, if that one side of the candle wasn't burning, being savings getting depleted, if you were able to just dedicate that same amount of time that you would have been walking dogs and doing personal training sessions to building the business further, could you have gotten there? And that's where, start venture backed businesses or people that have, wealthy family backings to, help them through those sorts of times are in a different position. Now they won't necessarily have that same entrepreneurial fight or flight like you had to kind of get you through that the second time. But I always think about that where there is that scrappiness that I feel like a lot of startup founders and entrepreneurs I talk to all seem to have, and it's almost intangible in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it still comes up today. 12 months into building this thing, this FinGhost, which is now a full-on branding and LinkedIn social media agency. We've worked with around 20 founders in the real estate and finance space. Some of them pretty big names that, if I told you we would know, but obviously ghostwriting and brand stuff, we have NDAs with all of our clients. But it's been really interesting because you get to these different levels of, okay, if we can work with 5 clients, how do we work with 10 clients? What processes, what things do we need in place? And everything could be going well, and then all of a sudden maybe you lose a client, or maybe an employee or somebody who was helping you, leaves unexpectedly. And so I think there's just these different levels of something kicks in where you're like, okay, we need to get scrappy, and I'll ask my mom to be our next client if I have to at that point. But it is, sometimes you need that backed against the wall feeling a little bit. Especially when things are feeling a little bit too cushy and everything's going right all the time.
Yeah, it's spot on. It's spot on. Now, the other question around that is, you got started. You mentioned ghostwriting a few times. Thanks to the whole Drake beef back, whatever that was, 2015. I'm familiar with ghostwriting, but for my audience who might not be as familiar, I'd love for you to explain that and then explain a little bit further your all's business and business model, just to put a ribbon around that.
Yeah, I didn't know what ghostwriting was 13 months ago, and I've been ghostwriting for 12 months. I A couple of people reached out to me while I was writing as a financial advisor and had asked me to coach them and help them, and nobody had really asked me to write for them. And I didn't understand that some of the biggest creators on Twitter, LinkedIn, a lot of them have content teams behind them, dedicated content teams, which seems really obvious now, but including a ghostwriter. And so I think ghostwriting is still kind of misunderstood because it could be ghostwriting a novel, it could be ghostwriting a Drake song, it could be ghostwriting a LinkedIn post. But overall, I stumbled on this by accident. I thought I was going to be coaching other financial advisors and other real estate people on how to build their brands on LinkedIn and get clients and build digital leverage basically over the next however many years, because I think everybody is going to want that, even if it's at a small scale. But so I ran into the way that I do it is I look for people on, who do I aspire to be more like? Whose content do I already consume? What are they up to? How are they writing things or recording their videos? What's their formatting like, their hooks? So I think studying other creators that I aspire to be more like led me to Twitter, where there's this whole ghostwriting thing. And Dakota Robertson is this ghostwriter from Twitter who I met and connected with. And it was just this perfect timing of I got into his funnel and on his email list, and he had a case study of how he helped this guy quit his teacher job, making $40,000 a year, and ramp up this ghostwriting business writing for founders on Twitter. And he was making $40,000 a month. And so I'm like engaging with, you never know what's true because you can go on the internet and there's all these people who, we make 100K a month here. But after you start pulling the curtain back and learning what some of these people are doing, how some of them are building really large businesses, large like 1, 2, 3 person businesses, large in terms of they're charging very high ticket prices to write tweets and write LinkedIn posts. So it was by accident. And there was just so much demand for ghostwriting. Like I couldn't sell the coaching. That's like somebody's got to show up and they got to be accountable. And we're on the ghostwriting side. If it's a CEO who's running a $50 million company and has 50 employees and doesn't have time to do this, but understands the value of it, I interview them once or twice a month. I really get to know them and their story, and then I help them bring out like genuine personal content that also shows their authority and makes them the authority in their niche. So we have CEOs of real estate development companies. We have, large influencers who have 1 million plus on video platforms, but maybe have been sleeping on Twitter and LinkedIn and Substack, some of these written platforms that we're focused on. So it's been really interesting because there is this crazy demand for it. And there's a lot of companies now, even Fortune 500 companies, where the CEO is recognizing it's powerful if I have a quote unquote personal brand and create content, because not only does it inspire your team to do the same thing, which creates this network effect of you have 100 employees posting on LinkedIn, and leads to your company, like the amount of organic traffic you can drive to your company, your offer, whether you're a solopreneur or a Fortune 500 company. Um, CEOs are starting to figure this out, starting to shift some of their budget. They might have been investing millions and millions in ads, where now they're like, well, if I can build trust with content and hire somebody to come in and help get the voice right and get the content right and all of that, then there's we've seen a lot of demand for it, and we think it's going to grow within our company. So we have a small, lean team, of writers and sales mostly, but we like to work with basically as few clients as possible and go as deep with those clients as we possibly can, because it is a pretty big lift of getting to know them, writing content for them daily and doing it in a way that feels genuine, because it is really their story. We're not, writing 12 Chrome extensions that they should, know about for 2024 or whatever. Some of the AI content you see posted online.
You beat me to the punch there because I was going to be my next question. I'm sure you get this from all of your prospects, but how do you guys address that situation right now with all of these large language models, all of the chat GPTs of the world, bards of the world that are able to pump out content that is getting better and better by the day? Now, obviously, there's a lot of caveats to that, but how do you guys address that when a prospect asks you guys, hey, like, how do I know this isn't written by AI, or are you guys using that in your brainstorming process? I'd love to hear your opinions on the current state of play there.
Yeah, I think AI is really interesting, and I'm fascinated by that. So I've been listening to, Lex Friedman podcast and his interviews with OpenAI founder, and really exploring it within our business, because I think for operations, there's a lot of room for AI and automation to come in and help us with the operations of our business. And we definitely use it for idea generation. And so the right prompts can come up with, really great idea generation for clients. But the prompts are the most important part, where we can actually train, a chat GPT 4 to understand the voice of one of our clients and get that right. So it's a part of our business. We definitely are not copying and pasting AI content, and our clients can tell. And I think that brings up a really interesting point, where there's this misconception of, if I'm a financial advisor and I want to write on LinkedIn and attract financial advisor clients, high net worth investors, I should be writing about 401ks and IRAs and all this financial education, which, if you can do that in a really interesting way, great. But there's a million other people out there doing the same thing. So whether it's AI generated or not, and you're just writing about that, you're going to be a commodity. And I've learned that people work with other people if they know, like, and trust you. So there is this personal storytelling piece that's very important to how we write our client content. And that's really what we see when on the back end. The whole point of this is to build an influential brand for our clients, but also to get them leads for their business, because a lot of them have real estate investment companies or they're financial advisors. And so for me as an advisor, I got a lot of inbound clients over 12 months, and it was a curve, or like a hockey stick. In the beginning, maybe you get one or two DMs a month. Nobody knows you. And then maybe 90 days in, you get a couple more. And then it kind of accelerates on this curve, where the more trust you build and the more you show up each day, the more DMs you'll get from people who are like, "Hey, Anthony, I've been following you for 3, 6, 9 months, and I really love your content. By the way, my wife and I, or my husband and I, have been talking about working with a financial planner, and you're the first person who came to mind because I follow your content every single day. So am I the best financial planner in the world? I'm sure there are people who are better at some aspect of it or not, but the fact that these people, as soon as they thought, I need a financial planner, my name came to mind. I think that's really what we're trying to do. And so they came to me because they resonate with my content, and not necessarily because I gave them the best 401k tips.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And in the spirit of the entrepreneurship conversation we were having earlier, I was on a client call this morning for my day job, and he said, "Yeah, I came across your podcast on LinkedIn, and you've been top of mind, and we wanted to reach out on this opportunity." And that's just a parallel in terms of like tying in the side hustle to the main hustle. But I've been hearing that more and more, and it's pretty validating to hear that. And I feel like as that transition, if I ever get to the point where I'm able to transition out of a W-2 job, I feel like I'll be able to kind of maintain a lot of relationships just from pumping out content regularly, or as I hope to continue to do.
Yeah, those are the best DMs to get. I mean, instead of having to chase people who actually come to you and want to work with you, those are also the people who usually pay you the fastest. You don't have to bug them 10 times before they pay you. And, they're not the micromanaging ones, where if you have to do a lot of convincing and like, hey, please, 5 sales calls, a lot of those times I've learned those might be the hardest clients to work with for the least amount of money. And it is powerful, because over time, it creates this effect where, if this is what's happening at 25,000 followers on LinkedIn, and I'm getting, 3 to 5 organic leads a day of my ideal client reaching out to me and saying that same thing, "This is timely for us, let's talk." What's it going to be at 50,000 and 100,000? Yep. And, so this compounding effect, where even our best clients, they kind of get the long-term investment in what this can be.
Yeah, nail on the head. I talked about it with Pomp last week about compounding interest and compounding, effort. And it proves time and time again, you're one of the kind of hurdles that I'm working through right now is just, pumping out regular content across all platforms daily. And I think about, on LinkedIn, I post once a week for the podcast. On Instagram, I'm putting out pretty much a reel a day. And I'm thinking about the growth of my Instagram versus LinkedIn in terms of the volume of content that I'm pumping out. And so I think about that all the time. If you're posting 365 days a year versus 52 days of the year. There's just so many obvious, there's mathematical obviousness in terms of why one platform would be succeeding over the other there. So I guess to that end, I'd be curious about your current thoughts on the creator economy today, cross-platform, and really where you see it going as we're wrapping up 2023 here, getting into 2024.
More people are reaching out than ever and saying, I need a personal brand. And these could be people who, um, aren't in the best job situation and aren't making a lot of money and are spending a lot of time on social media, seeing other people who, aren't influencers with 1 million followers. They might be somebody with 5,000 followers who is making a full-time income. And so there are more of these people who aspire to make money by leveraging social media and an audience and creating an offer that you can eventually sell to your audience. Um, so more and more of those people are reaching out. We're right now, because it's such a heavy lift to work with a ghostwriting brand advisory client. We can only work with so many people per year, and so the free content is one way to continue to educate and help people. And there's a lot of resources out there, but we're also putting together a coaching program where it's more cohort style, and we can just basically take what we've learned about building an audience and copywriting and offers and things like that, and really help package it into a repeatable system. Because what you were saying about content, I think that's like having this long-term mindset and understanding that it is going to take time. And in the first 90, 180 days, maybe longer than that, it's going to feel like the results are small. And a lot of the times you're going to say, why am I doing this? Why am I showing up here every day and spending my time and energy for $0, when I don't know if I'm gaining any traction? So I think just knowing that there's like levels to it. And so looking at somebody like me who now, we're writing for multiple people at the same time while also writing for ourselves on multiple platforms and have these systems, like that is not where you should start. I think the publishing habit of start with one platform, try to maybe show up and engage a little bit, comment on other creators, stuff we like, that can help and help you get noticed. And, start posting, because it is getting over that imposter syndrome. And I'm not a writer or a creator, and I don't have anything good to say or any stories or content ideas. That's that first level that you kind of have to get through before you can even think of, how can I make this a full-time income and get from my job to, making $10,000 a month online. So if you kind of break it off into pieces and say, I'm going to commit to this for 90 days, starting in January. LinkedIn is a great place because Twitter, you can get a lot of trolls, and it can be, there's just a little bit more noise over there. So I feel like if you don't like the negative comments that come in, then maybe try LinkedIn, because it's a little bit more professional, but you can still um, talk about your personal story, your career journey, successes, failures. There's a lot of great courses out there that if you're just looking for like, how do I post for 30 days straight and come up with ideas? I think you mentioned uh, Dickie Bush and um, yeah, there's all these creators, Justin Welsh, Sahil Bloom, like people who you can follow and see, like emulate them. How are they posting? How often are they posting? Where are they posting? You don't have to be those creators right from the start with 1 million followers, but if you pick one platform and just build that habit first and don't worry so much about making money and getting followers, after you get past that level, then turn it into a repeatable system and maybe get a coach or buy a course to figure out how do I get to that next level of making my first dollar or getting my first client.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you. And really, I guess from your seat, that this idea of digital entrepreneurship and or even solopreneurship for that matter, what's that like for you? Did you start this business up entirely yourself? Did you have co-founders? What was that journey like for you?
I started it by myself with the intent of being a solopreneur and maybe having a few clients and trying to get to $10,000 a month, because I felt like if I could get to $10,000 a month, some of that goes towards taxes. You know, you have to pay your own health insurance. Luckily, I was married and asked my wife, like, "Hey, can you help us pay the bills for a couple of months if my business doesn't do well in the first 2 months?" Because even with that trust baked in, I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. So, yeah, I think I went in with the intent of being a solopreneur, and I think I would recommend most people go in with that intent, not trying to build a company where you also have to manage employees, which is an own skill set, different and maybe a headache that you don't want to deal with. But I've been really lucky I found a co-founder a couple of months in, and he actually interviewed me a year before that on his podcast. And he was somebody in the real estate space, Jesse Fuchsia, who I really respected, who was a real estate investor. He had a podcast. He was a couple years younger than me. And so we had just been in contact and keeping track of what the other person was doing on LinkedIn over a 12-month period. And when I realized how much demand there was, and me not being able to take on, this many founders at once, but wanting to, see if, hey, do you want to come over here and help me build this thing? Because he has an audience in real estate, and it just made a lot of sense. And we have this complementary skill set where he loves getting on the phone and closing people. And if he does that, 5 phone calls a day with our ideal clients, he's really happy. And if I have 1 phone call a day, I'm like drained and, an introvert who's like, oh, I need to clear my calendar. So I'd taken enough of those sales calls as an advisor that I was like, yeah, if you want to do that over there, and I focus on delivering great content for our clients and figuring out some scalable processes. So it's been really interesting. It's him and I, we're co-founders now, 50-50. And then we just brought on somebody who's more or less a writer, head of content, because we are looking to scale a little bit. And we have some other offers too. So a lean team of 3 people, and then we have a couple of virtual assistants, which I've learned the skill of delegating. And, for our big clients who want full account management and they want somebody who can comment in their voice, answer DMs in their voice, basically manage their entire account. So we've even learned, like, of our ideal client, what is that best offer that they really want? And we continue to iterate and repackage it. So we went the route of, basically growing a 3-person business with some help from contractors. But for most people, I think the solopreneur route and getting to do that, like, you can work, if you get to a place where you work really hard for 12 months building an audience and you have a great offer and consistent clients. I know some who are making multi-six figures, they have no employees, they maybe work 4 hours a day. It took them a long time to get to that point, but they're more like this is a lifestyle thing. I don't need one more client or want one more client. I'm happy with 3 and a course and publishing once a day on LinkedIn to drive some leads. So it is really interesting how it's kind of reinventing the career space and what people can do for careers, I guess, now.
The whole economic infrastructure around employment is just changing so much. And you mentioned virtual assistants, and I want to double click on that for a second because I personally find it fascinating. I've talked to a bunch of folks on this show about time management and different planning tools for prioritization and scheduling. I first heard about virtual assistants in Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week. That book is obviously, I actually talked about this on a pretty recent episode. I was hoping that he recreates that book in 2024 with the build out of AI further. But I'd be curious on the virtual assistant side, what's that like for you guys, and what advice would you have for people? I mean, like I've said, I've found Tim Ferriss's commentary on that very interesting, but it's a little outdated at this point. So I'd love to hear your latest and greatest perspectives.
Yeah, in the beginning of my business, when it was just me as a solopreneur, it was me doing everything. I'm finding the clients, I'm closing the clients, I'm onboarding them and writing for them. I'm doing all of my own social media management and inbox management. So I first learned about virtual assistants probably same as you. It felt like this thing where I was like, I'll never need that. What would a virtual assistant even do for me? I don't know how to delegate. I don't know how to train them. I'm worried that, if I do delegate something and give them access to my inbox, what if something goes wrong? So up until a few months ago, I was very much of that mindset until I started hearing how other entrepreneurs that I really respected were building these sort of like lifestyle design systems into their work. And virtual assistants was one that kept coming up where if there's something repeatable that you do every single day that could be done by somebody else, um, there is this skill of it took me a long time when I hired my first virtual assistant. I think she was probably on board for a month before I even gave her anything to do because I was so busy that I was in this trap of I need a virtual assistant, but I'm too busy to even figure out how to delegate to this person and what could be done. So I think it got to a breaking point where the company was growing and my role was changing. And I just said, I need to change my mindset and put some trust, but also figure out how to train somebody else to do things that really just, it wasn't valuable for me to do all of those things at the same time anymore. If I could focus all of my time and energy on, the highest value tasks possible, writing for clients, making sure that my co-founder has everything he needs, making sure that we have scalable systems and the right people in the right places. But it took me a really long time, I would say 6 months, to get to a comfortable place of having one virtual assistant and trusting in her to handle, some things like if I'm traveling and I still want to engage and reply on my content on LinkedIn or reply to DMs that won't get missed or read my emails, I can delegate some of that stuff. And so training and setting up the systems for that. And then we realized, oh, wow, our clients actually really need something like this. And they start asking you for things like, oh, I have a lot of leads in my DMs because you have been driving them there with ghostwriting, but I don't have the time to go through them and actually build this backend process. So that's where we then built a system where now any client we bring on, if they choose the package with the virtual assistant, who spends 20 hours a week, managing their LinkedIn DMs, sometimes commenting for them, giving email summaries and some other things. We turned it into basically a service offer where we built it for ourselves first, and now we're like, oh, we can actually offer this to our own clients. So it's interesting. I'm actually looking to do a standalone virtual assistant service because Nick Huber, if you're familiar with him, he's kind of in the world. I've heard him on my first million podcast
Yep.
a couple of times, and he talks about he has a 100 million or 200 million self-storage real estate facility business. And he talks about how he has oversees virtual assistants and contractors running a lot of this business and even communicating with some of his high net worth LP investors who are millionaires, and doing some pretty heavy lifting stuff. So that's where I realized, wow, there's actually really talented people that if you put trust in them and you learn the skill of delegation can be a part of your team and a big part of your team. And also, it's tough for a company like us to be able to hire somebody from the US full time and pay them competitively. But if we, and some people have feelings about this too, but people who are virtual assistants or overseas contractors, there are more of these companies coming up. Like I know Nick Huber is involved with one, I think Shepard, but there's really great talented people who want to work for companies like you and will actually be making a lot more inside of your company than they would, something within their own country. And so I've really embraced the virtual assistants and delegation. It's still a skill I'm learning, but I'm endlessly fascinated by how some of these other entrepreneurs are scaling, these big businesses with overseas talent.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. One of the episodes that'll air right before this is with a guy named Pratik Thakur who has started a handful of different outsourcing businesses, and a lot of them have a VA component. So super interesting, and appreciate your color there. You mentioned as you guys are growing and scaling and potentially taking on new clients in 24. As we round out here, what do you guys have on the vision board for the new year? What's to come for Finghost, and what should we be on the lookout for?
Yeah, we really want to do what we did in 2023, except we're just in this place where we can do it better than ever for our clients. So we write content for them. We're also heavy on the brand advisory side. So that could be anything from helping them put together their funnel as an influencer of social media at the top, and then a lot of them are building an email list where I'm very bullish on Substack. So we'll also help them grow an email list, and a lot of the times we're helping package things on the back end, like helping people package their offers better, improve their back end systems, so that when we drive them a lot of leads, our job, they're able to close them and turn that into a repeatable system. So yeah, CEOs of real estate companies, you think of like the Grant Cardones and the Ryan Pinedas, and a lot of these people who are leveraging their personal brand to raise money from LP investors. A lot of them have multiple offers like coaching, courses. So we really just want to work with founders who are in the finance and real estate space, who are all in on building a personal brand, and specifically on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Substack, because that's just what we're best at, those platforms. And I think we're going to stay in our lane there. So we're planning to work with between 10 to 12 founders at one time, which with demand, at this point, we're kind of putting people on wait lists and taking deposits and things like that. So we're in a really good position of getting to work with people. I think we mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, I get to learn every single day. Somebody is paying me for me to hop on a call and learn from their 10 years of real estate investing experience and building companies and, building their brands and teams. So more of the same, just doing it, in a bigger way and better. And if anybody in your audience is interested in that, or, the coaching element where they kind of want to do that on their own, LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. And really that's where I put out the best content. But 2024, also want to diversify. I think it's time for me to take Twitter seriously, and same with Substack. Some of the things that I've written for clients, writing 40 newsletters in a row on Substack, 40 weeks in a row. I'm like, I haven't even done that for myself yet. So I think it's time for me to, kind of level up my own brand as well, in 2024.
Yeah, I'm also very bullish on Substack, and candidly surprised the platform hasn't taken off even further over the last few years. But I think right as Substack was gaining a ton of momentum, and I think it was probably late 2020, early 2021, that's where Reels came out, and I feel like that just kind of cannibalized a lot of the momentum that Substack had, which is probably just a good litmus for where society is in terms of the short form content versus where I feel like we're shifting back to the Substacks of the world. But no, I totally resonate with what you outlined there, and maybe bifurcating out Finghost and what you're building there, and then you personally, any personal goals or aspirations as we get into the new year for yourself?
Yeah, fitness has always been a big part of my life. And I've realized how much of an impact it has on my mental health and my performance in my work. So it's interesting, as I've had more career success than ever in 2023, I kind of went from, running a marathon a year and training for marathons, and just having that where every day I knew I could block time for myself and, physically be healthy and eat well and all that. And then in the last 12 months, starting a company, my wife's from Brazil, so we traveled to Brazil twice. We traveled to a few other places. So my health has fallen off a little bit in terms of like consistency and definitely on the endurance side. So trying to figure out this whole lifestyle design of building a successful company while not burning out and while also, being able to have time for me and my wife and time to work out and do those sort of things. So that's really what I'm focused on the personal side.
Excellent. And then how about long term for you personally? What's on personal vision board? Are you trying to raise a fund one day? Are you trying to start a family? What's longer term goal for you?
Long-term goals, I just find it really fascinating that these entrepreneurs who build large audiences and have clearly put in the time and effort, like Pomp is a great example. And there are other entrepreneurs who are kind of following the same model where if you build a trusted audience and you do it for long enough, um, you can kind of build this portfolio of companies, of different companies that amplify one another. So, I mentioned the FinGhost ghostwriting and brand advisory. Um, things like a standalone VA service, especially for our niche. That's really interesting to me because I'm in this space where I get to connect with a lot of high net worth investors, and I'm learning, even more about the real estate and the private equity side and the Cody Sanchez's of the world. So that's really fascinating to me. And I think over the next year, building FinGhost into a consistent cash flowing business, then maybe I can take some of that cash flow and, invest in interesting projects or even build companies and, work with operators to sort of run those companies under the umbrella of, my overall sort of holding. I don't know. So I'm not at that place yet, but I definitely think that far forward. But at the same token, I want a family. I don't yet have kids. I've been married. I got married last April, so not yet for a year, but we are thinking about if we have a family, I don't want anybody to have to run back to work 14, get 14 days off after your kid is born and have to run back to work because I don't have financial freedom. I have to keep
Right, right.
working for that paycheck. So even within my own business, I'm thinking about, before I get to that point, how can I make it so that these companies can run if I'm with my kiddos and, there's some diversification and consistency with income coming. So a little bit of lifestyle design, a little bit of, interested in building multiple things, and trying to not chase too many shiny objects at one time.
It's hard to do, but I'm excited to see where you take it, and really appreciative of your time. I'll plug your LinkedIn handle in the show notes. Anything else you'd want to plug to the audience?
No, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I do have a newsletter under my own personal brand called the Solo CEO. And so that's where a lot of sharing some of these things that we talked about today on Substack and, maybe a potential podcast in the future, which I really like the Substack podcasting feature that they have. So if you want to jump on my email list and then find me on LinkedIn, those are the two best places.
Beautiful. I'll be sure to plug them in the notes. And Anthony, it was great to get to meet you today and excited to stay in touch.
Yeah, man. This was a really fun conversation and thanks for having me on.